Hey, thanks for joining. I'm your host, Chris Gennaro. My co-host is Rizk, and today we have Gene from Bandit. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Good.
Good.
Um, so let's get started about your new album. I think it's already done. I think it's coming out in the spring, but you have dropped a single and a video. I'm gonna mispronounce the heck of this name. It's
Juniata.
Juniata, and I even have the phonetic spelling written down,
Yeah.
and I still effed it all up. But let's talk about that and what we can expect from the new album.
All right. Well, every album I've done with the band, I kind of like to have a theme. The theme with this one is my struggles with depression and mental illness. It's funny, I thought the theme would be failed relationships, but it sort of turned into that over time because they're kind of the same thing. Juniata is the story of one of the times I went to a mental hospital out in Juniata College in central Pennsylvania, kind of near Penn State, and just my experience being there. And in terms of the actual music, Jack has been listening to a lot of Meshuggah and Car Bomb. So it opens with this like kind of off kilter metalcore breakdown in which I go woo over, right? And then there's like kind of like this really great grindcore song in the middle, and then towards the end we bring back the breakdown, but it's like an even weirder time signature. And Colin from Kralis, who recorded the album with us, he does a solo during the last breakdown on like a 12-string guitar.
Oh wow. 12-string guitar. Cool.
Yeah. I saw it in the studio, and it's just the neck is like this thick.
Cool.
Yeah, it's funny because I don't recall hearing a ton of Meshuggah on your previous stuff, but on that new song, I was like, oh, there's Meshuggah part right there.
Yeah, absolutely. Jack, in the time since I've joined the band, his guitar writing has gotten more technical and more advanced. And I feel like on this album, like this is like a metal album, and it's like a tech metal album.
Mm.
And that's why I'm like really excited to release it, to show that like once again our sound has really evolved.
That's funny because we were talking before the interview about how you guys are not on Metal Archives.
Yeah.
But so and we've done stuff in the past about maybe where I don't agree with their sort of line between metal and not metal. We're not going to go into that too much, but it sounds like this might be your in to Metal Archives now.
Yes, we wrote this album just so they would
just so you can get into Metal Archive.
There you go. So you can be like, yeah, I'm one of you guys now.
Absolutely.
You were talking about your themes of the album. I guess it's a good segue to maybe talk about Self-Inflicted, which had another theme to it.
Yeah, so Self-Inflicted was the first album I did with them. It's based off my own issues with substance abuse, and also at the time I was working as a clinical aide, overnight shifts at a rehab, and a lot of what I saw there and experienced on my own really influenced the lyrics very heavily.
And I guess the segue from that is how you got in the band. Self-Inflicted was the first release you did with them, with Bandit, but I think they've been around 2012, 2013, something around there.
So from what I understand, so the original members are Jack McBride on guitar, who still is on guitar. Michael Thomas was playing bass, and Kevin Nolan played drums. And from what I understand, they met at the School of Rock in Wilmington, Delaware.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. And I'm going to say it was probably 2010, 2011.
Okay.
Wow.
And Jack approached Michael. he said, I want to start a band that sounds like Full of Hell and Harm's Way, right? And Full of Hell 2 are from Elkton, Maryland, which is very close to Wilmington, Delaware.
Mhm.
So they recruited Kevin Nolan, who was like the only drummer at the school who could play blast beats. They released an initial demo. I think it was called Never. They wrote a couple of songs. They're like buried deep in the internet. I heard them. They're like pretty not good. You know? Then I don't know if I have the order correct. They did a split with a band called Thunder Muscle, who are no longer around. That was the first thing I heard from them. It sounds like really blown out, feedbacky Nails, but worse, right? And so what happened was I graduated college in 2014. I moved back in with my parents that summer. That summer I had some pretty violent incidents that led to me quitting drinking. And when I quit drinking, I thought, well, I need to get out of the house. So I started going to hardcore shows in Westchester. So I first met Bandit. Magruder Grind had contacted them about putting together a show in Philly. And I had gone to that show, but I'd missed them. And I met Jack, and he told me about a show they were playing in Westchester. And so I started seeing them in Westchester. I was a fan of grindcore. And, you know, so if I knew there was a grindcore band local to my area, I was going to support them. I quickly developed a friendship with them. And eventually I, meandered my way into convincing them to let me sing the last song of their set, which is this song from that split called Neglect, which is more of just a slow hardcore song. And so for a year and a half, every Bandit set would end and I would sing Neglect and I would go nuts. I would smash the mic on my head. I would bleed everywhere. I would, it like utter insanity, right? Because at the time they were all doing vocals, but they're all playing instruments. So they got to kind of stand there. So I would try to really embody the violence. And then I want to say the spring of 2016, Kevin had some personal stuff going on. So he had to like withdraw from the band. So Jack and Michael approached me about doing vocals full-time, which I agreed to. And Michael moved from bass to drums, right? And so, but up until then, they had released another full-length Play Faster Die, which I'm going to be honest, is like one of the worst power violence albums I've ever heard. Like, I re-listened to it a couple months ago and I was like, God, like, there's like one song on there called Die, where the only lyric is die. It's like, die, 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 die. It's actually pretty good. But, and then right before I joined, they recorded a split with this band from New Jersey called Ground.
I've heard of Ground.
I think I've heard that too.
I had known separately from them. And that split's a little bit better. There's still a lot of feedback, which I just hate. But the songwriting had definitely like picked up a level. And that really set the stage for the first thing I did with them, which was Self-Inflicted.
Okay.
Now, you guys are based out of Philadelphia now, though?
Yeah.
So
they were originally like a Delaware hardcore band, but they pissed off enough people in Delaware that they became a Philly grindcore band.
Okay.
So, I mean, they like originally they played hardcore shows, right? And this is probably why we're not on Metal Archives.
That would make sense.
Yeah. But I really connected with Jack because he had a love he had a developing a love for grindcore, and I had really been into this music for a while. And the one album we all loved was This Comp Kills Fascists, which was a power violence compilation released on Relapse Records, which had Insect Warfare, Magruder Grind, Weekend Nachos, Maruda, a whole bunch of bands, which, you know, I've talked to enough people in the scene, and that album really had like a big impact on this generation of grindcore musicians. And so, you know, when I met them, they were like more of a hardcore band with some blast beats, but they were moving in the grind direction.
Now, you said that you're now straight edge, yes?
Yes.
Okay, are they straight edge?
Jack is, Michael isn't, and our new drummer Gobinda isn't.
Okay. Let's talk about Gobinda, because you said he's from. Well, first off, I thank you for saying his name first, so that I didn't have to butcher it. I took your lead on that one, but he's in Chipang.
Yeah. So what happened was, so we recorded Self-Inflicted, I want to say in like 2016, 2017. And then we did a lot of like weekend touring. One of the first weekend tours we did was in like Virginia, Baltimore, DC, and it was with this band Chipang, who are a bunch of Nepalese immigrants who moved to Queens and started playing grindcore. And they have two drummers. And right away, we felt really connected. There was like a kindred spirit type thing because they really like to push boundaries. And we really like to push boundaries, especially with our live performances. You know, we like to attack the audience, run into the crowd, take our clothes off, really do anything to remind people that they're at a grindcore show and, you know, not a Elton John concert. And Chipang likewise have an intense live performance. They have two drummers and they really just do not give a fuck, right? Every time I see them, the lineup's different. They'll have like a saxophone or a noise guy or someone just hitting cymbals, right? Very experimental. And they really appreciated what we do. Yeah.
Speaking about experimental, you were talking before about playing with Test, and I was kind of interested because I know a little bit about them, but you guys have experience. You've played with them. They're a grind, for people who don't know, they're a grindcore band from Brazil, but they do a lot of weird stuff.
Yeah. So Test. So in 2018, right, we played Maryland Death Fest, right? And Test also played. So you know, Test are like two guys from Brazil. So we did a short weekend run a couple of days after MDF with them. They actually stayed at Jack's house when we played in Philly. I think we also played some shows in Brooklyn with them. And yeah, I mean, like I was telling you before the interview, it's so wild, experimental. It's almost like 70s hard rock mixed with jazz, mixed with like power violence or blast beats or whatever. It's incredibly dynamic music. And, you know, a lot of grind bands, like especially when I first joined, they would give us a tough time about, oh, you guys sound like metalcore, or you're just a hardcore band. Oh, you don't play enough blasts. You don't sound like Insect Warfare, where your D beats, right? And, you know, Jack and I and Gobinda and Michael, we don't give a fuck about any of that, right?
Mhm.
Grind to me has always been about, you know, experimentation and pushing the boundaries, right? I mean, John Zorn had that band with Mick Harris from Napalm Death, Naked City or Torture Garden or whatever it was called. And, you know, from its very foundations, it's about pushing limits. And, you know, any band that pushes limits like that, we're just going to naturally gravitate towards. So Test were, you know, right away, you could tell, you're like, wow, these guys, they push serious limits.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Napalm Death because when they came out, and I'm sadly old enough to remember them coming out and hitting the scene. They would always refer to themselves as a hardcore band because in England that's what hardcore was. In New York, it was a completely different thing. But it just goes to show you like how these terms and this music is sort of evolving in all these different places separately and coming back together again. But you got Napalm Death calling themselves a hardcore band, which is like, if you know New York hardcore, it's silly. But that's the way these things sort of went.
Yeah, it's funny. We were just in the UK and we played a couple of shows, and they were like, "Oh, so the band who's going to play before you, they're a ska band." And I was like, "Oh shit, it's going to be like Mighty Mighty Boss Tones. Like people are going to be wearing plaid." And this band came out and they played like fast hardcore.
Mm.
And I was like, that's not ska.
It's not ska.
Right? And then and then they'd be like, "All right, well, this next band's a hardcore band." And I'd be like, "Okay, like here comes some breakdowns," and it'd be like a D-beat band.
Mm.
And I'd be like, "Oh, it means different things to different people."
Yeah.
And like, I mean, grindcore, when I was first getting into it, people would be like, "Do you like grindcore? Do you like Job for a Cowboy?"
Oh, they called that grindcore.
Yeah,
wow.
yeah.
Weird.
And then Insect Warfare were like, "Listen, that is not grind."
Yeah.
And like, part of it, like I used to get really hung up on that stuff, but now I'm just like, it's just like slang or language. Like different words are going to have different meanings to different people, and no one's meaning is any better or worse than someone else's.
Sure.
I mean, most of the normies I deal with they call everything with screaming and it's screamo.
Okay.
Right?
What's a normie?
So a normie is just a non-metalhead,
Okay.
like a non-punk, like my parents, right?
What's the word in Harry Potter they use for
Muggle?
Muggle.
So normie is like the muggle of the metal.
Like muggle.
Yeah. I even feel weird using that, but it's, it gets the point across.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I think we all have people in our lives that are totally do not understand metal.
A little unrelated, but obviously this is going to be really not considered this. Like back in the day when they had the CD club where you could get like 10 CDs for a penny, but then you got to pay for one at full price. They were advertising in a metal magazine, probably Metal Maniacs, which is no longer around. And I guess they were trying to, market to the metal crowd reading that. So they basically were just picking grunge bands and putting labels under them. Like that's what it is. They had Nirvana, and under it said industrial noise. and then it had a big like zoomed in picture of Scott Weiland, and it said grindcore. They called that grindcore.
Wow.
I wish I had that issue. It's the most absurd thing. It was just like they're obviously trying to target the readers of the magazine, and they're just like putting totally absurd titles on, like, because grunge I guess was big at the time. So yeah, it's just totally silly, total silliness. Yeah.
Speaking of Nirvana, you know where this is going.
I think I do. Are you going to ask about our cover?
I am going to ask about your cover tune from Bleach.
Yeah. So, okay. So when we recorded Self-Inflicted, right? No. Oh, no. I think we recorded Warsaw, right? Which is our 7-inch from 2018.
I think it came off. It was on the at least in Bandcamp. I think it's part of the Self-Inflicted bonus tracks.
Oh, okay. Well, I think during that period, so at some point it was understood we were going to do a 4-way split with us, Tess, Chapong, and another band who will remain nameless.
Okay.
And Chapong, Shatiz from Chapong, he is very free flowing. He gets creative, borderline unreasonable. And so he was like, he had all these grandiose ideas about what the split was going to be. And that fourth band dropped out because of it. So Test and Chapong ended up doing a split, and we like had a bunch of leftover songs, one of which was the Nirvana cover. I remember I think it was after recording Warsaw, we went back to record two songs. I think Organ Grinder, which is on the like tape version of Self-Inflicted, and then Bleach, which I have never been more prouder of a vocal performance of my entire life. And the beauty of that is the cover version really doesn't follow their version. It's like shortened, it's different. The lyrics come in at different points, but the vibe is still there.
Yeah, I mean that song Paper Cuts is definitely one of their I was gonna say less commercial things that they've done.
Yeah, so they have this, their first album ever is called Bleach. I really like the first song, Negative Creep. And I always thought it would be cool if like a hardcore band were to cover that. And we tried, and for whatever reason, we couldn't nail the groove. So they decided to go with Paper Cuts, which is basically sounds like a Melvin song, right?
Yeah.
It's got that like, it's like weird kind of off time droning. They're like boom, 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 boom. And the lyrics are like incredibly twisted. And it really gave me a chance to do this sort of Jesus lizard man losing his mind, like shouty to screamy type vocals, which I really loved doing. And we do have a song on the new album where I do like spoken word that evolves or devolves into screaming, and it has a similar vibe to it. And I've always, so, you know, the number one influence on our band is Pig Destroyer, and they've done a really good job of having some subtle influence from like hard grunge bands like Unsane, Helmet, Melvins, where there's just enough like sinister flavoring to give like the metallic stuff that much more punch, right? And so I really like that we're trying to do that with some of these songs.
Eric, you were going to ask something about
the comedy.
comedy.
Oh
Yes,
yeah,
the comedy. So you actually you do stand up, and then you also do some like you write some sketches too. Is that right?
well, so before I joined Bandit in college, I started a sketch comedy group.
Okay.
We were actually called Weekend Nachos.
Oh,
But
okay.
then John from Weekend Nachos sent us an email asking us to change our name
Okay.
after he saw some of the sketches.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't do the sketch. I did a couple of sketches for the Hard Times that were like comedy slash like therapy focused.
Sure.
But now I mostly just do stand up. It's a good outlet. It's funny because when I joined Bandit, Jack would get mad at me for telling jokes in between songs.
Okay. Okay.
But I think he sort of made his peace with it, right?
Okay.
Because I think he didn't want us to be like a gimmick or a joke band.
I get it. I get it. Sure.
You know, but like there's this band Iron Lung who are a power violence band, and their drummer is very funny in between songs, and it's like it really adds to the live because the songs are so brutal and intense.
Yeah.
And I just it, you know, like I do see a lot of bands who just take themselves like so seriously.
Yeah.
that I it's just like in between songs, I just want to add some levity,
Sure. Sure.
because it's like when we're playing the music, it's brutal, it's savage. I mean, I'm punching people, I'm throwing up. So, I just want to, add some levity between the song.
Sure.
It sounds more like a Gigi Allen show than like anything.
People have compared us to him, to that band, Anal Cunt. I think the difference is those guys didn't make good music. I mean, at the end of the day, like, we do have a very extremely intense show, but I think we are creating like really technically involved, meaningful music that would stand on its own.
I just realized something looking at my notes. If Michael went from bass, wait a second. Who's your bassist now?
We don't have a bass player.
Okay, that would be why I can't figure that out from my notes.
So, like I said, our biggest influence is Pig Destroyer, who for a long time didn't have a bass player. Magruder Grind didn't have a bass player.
Yeah.
Discordance Axis didn't have a bass player.
Yeah.
That's just, drums, guitar, vocals is kind of, to me, like the classic grindcore setup.
Sure.
I happen to think, like, not that it's impossible, but I do sometimes think the bass just muddies it up, because the music is so fast and so intense.
The funny thing is that you're talking to two bass players, but
yeah, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
No,
Eric, what do you think about that? Does your bass muddy things up?
Well, that's why we're not playing grindcore though. So
Okay.
Yeah. But no, I get it. I get it. What about you guys have a show coming up in the new year with in New York at Gridlink?
Yeah, we're playing with Gridlink. That's John Chang from Discordance Axis. That's the band he created after Discordance Axis. The band consists of him, Takafumi Matsubara from Japan, and Brian Fajardo from Texas on drums, who also plays in PLF.
Yeah.
We tour with PLF in Europe over the summer.
Nice.
Gridlink is just such a huge inspiration on us. It's like really meaningful to be able to play this show.
Cool. How was the tour with PLF over the summer? How'd that go?
I mean, it was amazing. It was we had toured Canada before, but it was our first like non-North American tour.
Okay.
There are a lot of funny stories. Jack locked himself in a bathroom in Hungary, and he got really mad at the gas station attendant over that. Yeah, it was fun. It's amazing how you just go to like Hamburg, Germany, and there's people who've heard of your band.
Oh, wow. Nice.
And you're like, and they're asking, not just heard, they're asking like, oh, are you going to play stuff off Demonstrations EP? And I'm like, what the fuck are you even talking about?
They're really into it. They're really into it. Good.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Good. Awesome.
Did you disappoint that guy, or did you do any of the old stuff?
Well, we don't do any of the old stuff. And at Obscene Extreme, there were a lot of people asking me about records that I wasn't on, right? Now, I'm not against that, because I joined the band and sang songs that I'm not recorded on. I'm just annoyed because I feel like that shit sucks. At least compared to what we're doing now. But what I noticed is in Europe, the power violence as a whole has a lot of fans. Like, a lot of people love bands like Infest and Crossed Out. And the earlier stuff has more of that punk power violence kind of vibe. But yeah, we haven't played those songs in like 3 or 4 years, at the least.
How does Jack feel when you talk about the old stuff in a not so nice way?
Well, I think he agrees. I mean, it's, I don't hate it. I think I like if I were to remove myself from the situation just as an appreciator of music, I think the new music is so more, dynamic, metallic, intricate, interesting, than the old stuff. I mean, the old stuff is kind of just, meat and potatoes power violence. And, I've talked to him, and it has a very near and dear place in his heart, as, any music I've created in my past would. But it's just surprising to me, if I were a fan of this band, I would, I would be excited for newer stuff, because I would see that the band was evolving into something else.
Sure.
But speaking about, so that stuff's not. Let's talk about, I guess, the new album, about when it's coming out and the label and what to expect and all that other stuff.
So we finished recording it this past March. Actually, I think this past February, because it was really cold. Then we sort of dawdled with the album art, which is like the cardinal sin of any band. We didn't have it done until I think like June. So it's going to come out next June, because the printing plants are all backed up at least a year, if not a year and a half. It's coming out on, so Shatiz from Chapong has a label. It's called Gurkha Commando Blast Team, aka GCBT. We've talked to someone else who wants to put it out on CD. I don't know if I can name drop him yet, but he's a pretty big name in grindcore, so that would be like really cool. And we just put out a single last month, just because we were dying to just get something out there, because we have put so much work into this, and to have to sit on it for a year was like unbearable.
Yeah, it's funny. You would think that the label would be like, we want you to tease something, but don't tease too much, right?
Yeah, well, and it's also like, don't tease too early, right? Because we released a single in October, and the album doesn't come out till like June, like 10 months, 9 months. So
that's pretty early.
Yeah.
What's the story about the art? You mentioned like you were having issues with it. Who did it? What was the thing behind that?
Well, I think we had this idea. So like Bandit on the last album, Warsaw's about my family's, it's about intergenerational trauma. My mom is a Polish immigrant, and her parents survived the Holocaust, and a lot of the lyrics on that album are inspired by like direct stories my grandmother told me about it. And that really seemed to speak with people. So the new album is called Siege of Self. It's based off a psychology book I read during the pandemic, but I kind of wanted to keep the sort of war imagery going, right? Because as corny as it sounds, depression is like a war. It's a very personal war. And so we had this idea. I had this image in my head of like a Mark IV British World War I tank, kind of rusted out in a field of flowers. And Jack really liked that idea. So for like 3 months, we reached out to people to paint it, and we got ghosted a lot. So eventually we just went on Instagram. I found this British artist. I can't remember his name, but he had a really interesting picture of two heads sort of coming from the same place, but reaching, one has like a smirk, and one has like a scowl. And I thought that was really evocative. So last year I was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, which is basically a form of depression where you hear voices, they're within you. It's not like you're detached from reality, but you do hear voices, and this image really spoke to me because in the past couple of years, I've had these moments where I felt like I was jumping out of my skin or something was taking me away from my body. And
Mm.
I felt like this image really displayed that perfectly. So we paid the guy like $100, 150. And, art, it is interesting. Like you have these like grandiose plans, and then through the circumstances, what comes out is what's meant to be.
Mhm.
And I definitely think that that kind of happened with the album art.
Nice.
What
A question. What is the Global Grindcore Alliance? What is that?
So during the pandemic, our friend Shatiz, who runs GCBT,
Okay.
there were obviously no shows. So he had a really good idea. He said, we're going to just get a bunch of bands from around the world to record them in their practice space or studio. And we're just going to stream it online, which we did. We had Sonny from Hate 56, who's like a big Philly hardcore videographer, just record us in our practice room. And it's funny because we ran through the set and then we realized the mic was broken.
Oh shit.
And we had to run through the set again.
Uh,
And everyone was pissed off, but I feel like that anger sort of adds to the energy
Nice.
of our set from that.
Nice. Will that continue at all, or is there like now that things are back, or not so much? Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I get the feeling that that was, mostly a pandemic thing. I mean, it. So I know Shatiz is. I think it was like the GCBT festival in August in New York. He had a bunch of bands from that compilation, and I know he's really basically trying to create a movement, which I think is really commendable. I think that's what grindcore needs. I think much in the same way that I mentioned the this comp kills fascists,
Yeah.
which by the way was organized by Scott Hall, the guitarist of Pig Destroyer, and that sort of had this like watershed moment. It reached a lot of people, inspired a lot of people. I think a lot of what Shatiz is doing is going to do the same for the next generations of grindcore musicians.
Nice.
Anything else you wanna go into before trying to think of I mean, I keep wanting to ask you if you're living in Philadelphia, is it okay to walk around with a Jets t-shirt on? But
well, it's funny. It's like so I've lived in Philadelphia since 2000, but I was born in New York and I grew up in Connecticut. So by the time I moved, I was 11. And to me, you have your team by then, right? Yeah. So people get confused. Like I feel like I'm the one person in Philly who isn't a Philly sports fan.
Okay.
It's very confusing. I actually got a Jets tattoo in Philly, and I'm convinced the woman did a shitty job
on purpose. Oh man.
Like it's like one of the worst leg tattoos you'll ever see.
No.
Yeah, I mean, in retrospect, you had to have thought, or you have to think that maybe that wasn't such a hot idea.
Yeah, I was young, I was dumb, and I was like, I need a Jets tattoo, and I need it now. And I got it. I got a really shitty one, and then they opened the season. They lost their first 6 games. But that's life as a Jets fan, right?
I guess we were talking earlier, and you were mentioning doing therapy and stuff. We've definitely had people on before that have talked about, addiction and trying to help people and stuff. And it seems like that might be a theme of what you got going on with your, some of your personal life stuff.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, like Bandit is very much interwoven into my mental health journey. And about a year in, I went to grad school. I got my social work degree. Over the pandemic, I got my license to be a social worker. And I tried working at a couple of outpatients and clinics for a while. And then I just said, you know what? Like people who listen to my band, they might need something. So I put out an ad on Instagram and poof, right away, like a whole bunch of people reached out. And now most of the people I work with know me through the band or know me through music, right? And I feel like there's a serious crossover between, you know, angry aggressive music and mental health, because really angry aggressive music at its core is about, you know, communicating difficult emotions. And it's cool because like it's allowed me to perform a role not as a usual therapist, right? Like last week I had someone come on and we just talked about metalcore for 20 minutes. And but I think people nowadays want more of a real person rather than like this sort of old man in a business suit. They want someone who feels like a peer, and especially someone who listens to the same music. I have a lot of clients who are in bands. We're trying to get them off the ground, and it's, well, I know what that's like. I know how frustrating it can be, or stuff like, you know, scene beef or this, that, and the other thing. And I think they really appreciate having someone who is like knowledgeable rather than someone who's going to treat them like their uncle at Thanksgiving. Like, what are you talking about? Right?
Sure, it makes sense.
Yeah. Someone who just understands how incredibly important this music is. Because I think anyone who listens to grindcore, you know, there really aren't too many casual, you know, no one's like, oh, I went through a phase, you know. Right? I mean,
Yeah,
you probably had that Carcass t-shirt for what, like 15 years?
I've had it a while. Actually, I think it's might be a boot. It might be a repress. It's not an OG. It's not an OG. But I've had it a while. I've had it.
Yeah, I actually just started cleaning out my closet of like rock t-shirts that I've had for 30 years, and I'm getting like $100 a pop for them on eBay, and I'm floored. Even so, because my wife like threw away half of them, which is like now kicks my ass. But I'm like,
I mean, you saved everything, right?
I try to save everything, but I'm a collector. I have the collector gene, and my wife is a purger. So if I married another collector, we'd be in big trouble. But so we do fight a lot about that stuff. But I am glad I
and
saved.
how does that make you feel?
I know, there you go. Yeah, like it's a therapy session right here.
Yeah, it's I get it. It's not good. It's not a good feeling.
That's funny.
When you're looking for your stuff that you know you still have somewhere, but then you realize it's not here anymore. It is in a landfill somewhere.
My mom, you know, growing up, she would throw out a lot of my shirts, but she wouldn't tell me. And so I remember I was like, a couple of years ago, I was cleaning my bed and I lifted up the mattress and there was this acacia strain shirt from like 10 years ago that had the word fuck on it. So she was like, I'm going to hide it from him. And it's like, I didn't even like that band anymore, but I was just pissed at like, can you just have a conversation with me about this rather than hide my...
Take it and without telling you.
Yeah, no, I think most people who are into metal, I mean, it's weird because like we had a guy on recently and he was like, yeah, my dad's into metal, and I was like, well, fuck, how old are you? Because that's crazy. But yeah, my parents, like my dad's a huge classical music head, right? I mean, he's like an audiophile and way into Mozart and stuff. And I just remember him coming into my room when I decided to plaster it up with like Slayer posters, and he just was like, I don't know what the fuck is going on here. He literally said, I'm not sure that you're my son. It was a half joke, but I think he was kind of questioning it a little bit.
I have a funny, so you mentioned CD clubs, right?
Yep. Yeah.
So in 1994, my dad joined a CD club, and you know, for those who don't know, it's like a magazine. You check off a couple of genres. They mail you like 3 CDs. So they mailed him 3 CDs. The first was a Tracy Chapman CD, right, which he kept for himself.
Mhm.
The second was a Pearl Jam CD, which he gave to my older brother. My older brother is 3.5 years older. He kind of like rock, right?
Mhm.
And I walked up, I was 5 years old. I said, Dad, which one do I get? And he just, without looking, he gave me the last CD, and it was Rage Against the Machine's self-titled CD.
Oh wow. Okay, yeah, that was popular, super popular back, yeah, when it came out. Yeah, wow.
And like I put it in the CD player. I skipped the first track because it had a quiet intro, and I was 5. I didn't like quiet intros.
Yeah.
The second song's Killing in the Name of, and
Oh
it's
yeah.
and right as he's screaming, "Fuck you! I
Yeah.
won't do what you tell me," is when my mom walked in.
Oh no. Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
And like I saw how upset she was, and I was like, I really like this music.
Wow.
Oh, that's not nice.
Yeah.
Wow, but that's intense. So you're listening to that when you're 5 years old.
Yeah.
Jesus. Okay, yeah. I
Yeah.
did not listen to stuff that intense at that age.
Yeah.
No,
That's
yeah,
where it all
5
went
would have
from
been.
there.
I didn't have the exposure at 5.
Yeah, me neither. Yeah, me
No,
neither.
I like, but I knew listening to even the stuff that was on the radio. I knew I liked dark stuff, and I knew I liked hard rock, and the more I got, the more I realized I needed it heavier,
Yeah.
and then that was the dark rabbit hole that I went down. And it was funny because there's a tons of bands I listened to for like 2 months early on, because it was like, oh, they're a little bit heavier than what I was just listening to, and now 2 months later I found something that was even heavier than that. So I literally had these 2-month periods where I was into like some band that just was like only good enough for that 2 months until I found something that was even better, or heavier.
Yeah, like I remember, like I came up in the new metal era, right? So I'd be like, oh man, like Godsmack, they're just the heaviest. This is the heaviest. And then I heard Disturbed, I was like, no,
No.
No.
And it's like a long stairwell down till you finally find like Slayer.
Mhm.
You're like, oh, okay. All of that is okay. I get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and we were talking about, I was cleaning out my t-shirts. There was like there's even a lot of thrash metal and speed metal. I'm a little bit older than you, so but like it's the same difference. Like there's this stuff, and I don't want to name bands and shit on people, but even that stuff, it was like, yeah, speed metal, then grindcore, and then speed. I was like, speed metal, bye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I remember when my friend first sent me Napalm Death. He sent me Scum. And I was like, this is unlistenable. It's so, and now I listen to it and I'm like, the recording quality is not that bad, but and like there are a couple of watermark points. Like when I first heard Dillinger Escape Plan, I was like, this isn't heavy, it's just chaotic. Do I like that?
Yeah.
And after a week or two, I was like, yeah, I really like that, But there are those points where it's like you get towards like the deeper end of the pool and you're like, can I swim in this? And you're like, yeah, I can swim in this. Yeah. And then it just keeps going and going.
Yeah, I definitely, there was something about going to early punk shows in the late 80s when even though I had metal sensibilities, there was something about just the chaos and noise of those punk shows that really spoke to me.
Yeah, when I was 15, I saw the first like really, really heavy band I saw was this band from Lansdale, Pennsylvania called Prevail, who play like metalcore, just a lot of breakdowns. But it was the first time I saw slam dancing.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen in my entire fucking life. And the cool part is their singer, Scott, who worked at the same mall I did like 10 years later, is now a huge Bandit fan.
Okay.
And I was like, whoa, like that to me is like, oh, you know, we've made it. If
Yeah.
Scott from Prevail from Lansdale loves us, like that's it. We can pack it in.
So anyway, we're getting sort of out of time, and I'm sitting here like I could bullshit all night about this stuff. But you want to wrap it up with any final thoughts? Any nuggets that you haven't shared yet, or any shout outs that you need to get in there?
I mean, yeah. So every time we play, I give this speech before the last song. I say, you know, all these songs are about mental health, my struggles with them. And, you know, we've lost a lot of people in the past couple of years. And I just want to say to anyone out there, if you're struggling with that stuff, keep fighting, keep living. Life is worth living. It can get better. And reach out for help. You know, it saved my life. It saved a lot of people's lives.
Cool. Send me some links. I'll put them in the description, and people can check them out if you know, if they're feeling like they need to talk to somebody.
Yep.
Okay, Gene, man, thanks. Thanks a lot for
Gene.
coming on. I really
Thank you.
appreciate
Thanks for
it.
having me. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.